Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Sekani, a podcast for people in their 20s who are trying to figure out life and not get lost along the way. Today's guest is Dr. Adam Kleinberg, a clinician with more than 30 years of experience working across 6 countries specializing in men's health, performance, and sexual function. He's the creator of Sexual Genius, a holistic framework that views sexual health as a window into a person's overall well being rather than an isolated issue. Instead of relying on quick fixes, Dr. Kleinberg helps men improve their health by addressing the deeper factors that influence energy, resilience, relationships, and long-term performance. Dr. Kleinberg, welcome to Conversations with Sekani. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
All right, so yes, I want you to take us back, right, to when you were in your 20s, basically. So what was life like for you then, and what dreams or
Uh,
ambitions were driving you?
so back in my early 20s, I was pursuing an acting career at the time.
Mm,
I did a lot after college. I dabbled in going to architecture school and then business school, and then pursued acting, and then pursued some work on Wall Street, and then, found what I do now in the health sector as a chiropractor. So I've been practicing now for 26 years. Started school or went back to school in my mid 20s. Yeah, so that's sort of been the career path for me.
Oh, all right. Okay. So, yeah. And I would like to ask, right, what first inspired you to, pursue a career in health and helping people improve their quality of life?
Yeah, so initially, I was helped by a chiropractor when I was young. I was only 13 years old and tried to get out of bed one day and had terrible back pain. And I didn't figure out the cause until I actually was pursuing chiropractic school already. So, probably 15 years later, after sort of learning, how the body breaks down and why these things happen, a lot of people will say, "Oh, I just bent over to pick up a pen and I threw my back out, and all of a sudden, sort of makes it sound like an event. But what I realized when I look back is I had this little fall when I was 9 years old where a hammock broke on one side and I landed on the small of my back. And as it threw things out of position there started to become some decay over time from the change in pressure. And that's actually what led me to have that low back problem at such a young age. I think this is a thing that a lot of people don't realize, very much like, you can have a cavity in your tooth for several years without feeling any pain or, other markers of health without any symptoms, whether it's early onset diabetes or heart disease or even cancer. A lot of times the body's not letting you know that there's a problem until it's very advanced. So this was a similar sort of situation for me. And then that just seemed to be something that I wanted to pursue, sort of a natural healthcare alternative. When I was very young, I wanted to be a pediatric cardiologist. So I always had the idea of helping people. But I'm glad that I went the route that isn't sort of drug and surgery based and really, we just help people in a natural way. A little bit later on, as I started to incorporate other wellness disciplines into my life, I've been plant-based now for almost 35 years. I've been meditating for almost as long. I've been in fitness my whole life. And when I've used these four disciplines in my own life to stay healthy, it's been pretty successful. I basically haven't seen a medical doctor or had any drugs in nearly 40 years. I'm
Hmm.
58 now, so the last time I really had any drug was when I was 18. Actually, I did have a case of whooping cough that needed some antibiotics, but besides that one case a few years ago that my daughter was nice enough to give to all of us, it's basically been doctor and drug free for 4 decades. So I feel like these four pillars of wellness, a plant-based diet, meditation, chiropractic care, and a fitness routine pretty much addresses things along all lines, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And it's
Hmm.
been a great run for me so far. So,
Wow. Whew. All right. 4 decades. Okay, so I would love for us to talk about that actually. So
sure.
you mentioned, the four pillars of wellness, right? If I heard correctly.
Yeah.
So yeah, you also mentioned, plant-based diet, chiropractic care. And
Mhm.
can you list out these four pillars of wellness and tell us what they actually mean?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously fitness is the most, utilized. Everybody's, has a gym membership, whether they use it or not.
Mm,
And we know, sort of the overall benefits of a fitness routine, but as it pertains to sexual genius, I know that your crowd is a little bit younger. For the older crowd, the statistics are a little bit frightening. 53% of men 40 and over are experiencing some type of erectile dysfunction, up to 25%, under that age, which seems a little bit crazy to me.
mm,
And of course, there are physical and psychological factors that both have an effect. But you know, utilizing these four pillars is just a very, well-rounded way of staying healthy, right? Fitness kind of speaks for itself. The plant-based factor, I think one of the primary benefits is proper blood flow. And of course, this
mm,
comes into play when we're talking about, a man's sexual capability, right? Without proper blood flow, you just cannot either uh, initiate and or maintain an erection. It's all about blood flow. So when we clear the vascularity of the body from interference, by taking out those plaques, the cholesterol, the saturated fat, and that chronic inflammation that animal products cause, then we get a blood flow to the genitalia. It's a similar thing for women, obviously not with the same consequence.
mm,
Men kind of have the pressure on them to at least be able to, no erection, kind of like, no sexual activity.
mm,
There's that pressure. I think that's where the psychological part comes in, and that's a good segue into what meditation does for one's health. There are so many documented benefits of meditation from every great institution in the world, from Harvard to Oxford to the National Health Institute. We're seeing more and more benefits unveiled by research into different types of meditation. I think it's more about being in the present moment and creating more of a spiritual experience rather than just a physical experience with your sexual partner, right? But just backtracking a little bit to the benefits of meditation, it's really about being in the present moment. We hear a lot about present moment consciousness, right? Being here now, because when we're thinking about something in the past, we're thinking about something that we may have regret for. When we're thinking about something in the future, it's typically something that we're going to have anxiety about. And
mm,
both of these things change body chemistry, create cortisol, stress hormones, which is a great way to to throw a monkey wrench into, being able to perform sexually. Um, so yeah, it's plant-based for blood flow, it's meditation for the psychological, the fitness has so many positive effects. And then lastly, chiropractic is what I do for a living. Most people look at it like as a remedy to battle either back pain or neck pain, sometimes headaches. Sometimes people are a little bit more educated about how it can have an effect on the organic processes of the body, the functioning of different organs. But if we look at it just from its main philosophy, it's a way to improve the function of the central nervous system. So specifically to sexual function and overall health, right? If the nervous system is not working to the best of its ability, then because it controls and regenerates everything in the body, we're going to have some type of compromise to our health or to organ function or to regeneration. Um, if there's interference in the nerves that, sort of conduct sexual activity, for women, lubrication, for men, and erection, arousal. It's that brain-body connection that we're improving by removing interference from the nervous system by aligning the spine and getting pressure from vertebrae off of nerves. I mean, that's really the simplicity of it. People tend to complicate it, but I think it's a little more simple.
All right. Okay, so like you mentioned, fitness, meditation, plant-based diet, and chiropractic care, right?
Yeah.
So now, yeah, we're talking about men's health now. So, you've said that sexual health is often a signal rather than the problem itself, right? So could you explain what you mean by that, basically?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the lack of sexual capability more as a symptom, it's like, well, what's driving that symptom? So again, I think there's two sides of this. There's the physical side and there's the psychological side. If we just look at it from a physical aspect, again, it's really about blood flow. So if we can improve the blood flow, we're going to improve the sexual capability. And if we consider that a lack of blood flow is typically from sort of chronic health diseases, things like, heart disease. Um, and I think it's also understanding what causes the chronic inflammation that leads to these diseases. And really, what the research is showing that it is the animal proteins themselves that are causing this type of chronic inflammation in the vascular and digestive systems of all human beings. If we focus on the vascular side, that's really what we're talking about in as far as where we see the symptoms that lead to sexual dysfunction on a physical level.
All right. Okay, so I'd like to ask, right, in your experience, what do you think are some of the biggest misconception men have about, performance and overall health, basically?
I don't think that the average man links the two, that they really understand the connection between sexual performance and overall health.
Mm,
I think that there needs to be a lot more and bigger discussions on, this topic. And then as far as the psychological is concerned, I think when my consciousness sort of expanded into understanding sex with a partner that you're connected with as a spiritual experience rather than just a physical experience, then it opened up a lot of doors, of understanding, of what was actually happening between two people.
mm. All right. Yes, thank you for sharing that wonderful insights with us, right? And
Okay.
like you mentioned earlier, chronic stress, overthinking, those are some things that most people, currently go through. That is why you said the meditation, right, helps, with that, basically. So now, the thing is, most of these things are what many young men are dealing with today, right? From chronic stress to poor sleep and burnout. And most of them don't even realize that these things have like a long-term effect on their life, right?
Right.
So I would love for you to, tell us how these have a long-term influence in their health and their performance, basically.
All habits have an effect on the body and health, right? A lack of
Mm,
exercise, eating poorly over time, not take, just even if we use like taking proper care of one's teeth. If you
mm,
don't brush and you don't floss and you don't see a dentist regularly, inevitably there's going to be breakdown, right? We
mm,
understand that like very clearly, right? But
right.
in the same respect, if we're eating a poor diet and we're not exercising over long periods of time, we're going to see the effect of that. We're going to see it
Mm,
cardiovascularly, we're going to see it physically and aesthetically. And so it's developing these good habits that are going to lead to health in your longevity. And we never know how long we're going to live, but we can control how well we live. And I think that's the big picture, right? Is living healthily and capable for as long as we possibly can, or whatever time that we are gifted with.
All right, wow. So, yeah, we often hear about quick fixes and instant solutions online, right? So,
Yeah.
why do you believe that lasting health requires a different mindset?
Yeah, there are no magic bullets, there are no quick fixes. There really aren't. I
Mm,
mean, on the rarest occasion, there might be a problem that's, something simple, that, oh my God, I can't believe that that was really the problem. It was so easy to fix. But when we look at these chronic health problems that plague most of the world, I mean, especially Americans, um, most deaths are from sort of lifestyle diseases, whether
mm,
it's heart disease or stroke or cancer. We can contribute that back to certain factors that really have to do with our daily habits. And so it's the inception and creation of these good habits that are going to lead to long-term health. And I think that's a pretty simple statement.
mm. All right, wow. So yes, thank you for that one. And I want us to, although for this short conversation, I've kind of like learned a lot, but I believe is going to, be very important for, men out there that are
Yeah.
listeners, right? So I want us to take like life lessons from this conversation.
Mm.
After more than 3 decades in clinical practice, right? What have your patients taught you about resilience and the human body?
Wow, that's a great question. A lot.
Mm,
We've seen patients who have sort of tried, so many patients who have come in saying they've tried everything, and this is
mm,
again going back primarily to the chiropractic work that I do. We have a sign on the practice window that says, "Last resort, doctor, miracles expected."
mm,
And we've had patients who've come in and said, I've tried everything. I've tried, the drugs. I've tried this. I've tried these types of practitioners, and nothing has worked. Can you help me? And yeah, more often than not, regardless of sort of, I think a more direct answer to your question is you can never judge, even as far gone as you think you might be, whether the body has the capability to recover, at least to some degree, right? A
mm,
lot of times, people are told, oh, this is a hopeless case and there's no hope for you. And, we've had people come in on crutches. We've had people come into the practice crying in terrible pain, not even being able to straighten up or not being able to even, bend over or do the simplest of things. And then in not that long a period of time, in a fairly short period of time, improving that function and getting the pressure out of the nervous system, allows them the regeneration over a little bit of time that's necessary to create that new capability, which a lot of times, has to do with not being in pain anymore, right? Very little we can do when we're
mm,
in chronic pain. Um, but also the organic things like patients with, terrible menstrual problems or patients with horrible digestive problems that can barely eat any different types of foods. And so seeing those and thyroid problems and liver problems. And so seeing those problems, find a simple solution that most people wouldn't have even thought of. Like, oh, if I align my spine, it can help my thyroid gland. Well, yeah, potentially it can. Everything's connected. Pressure on the nerves that go to the thyroid from the spine, and then the thyroid may not work properly, may not regenerate properly.
mm,
They go to the digestive system or they go to the cardiovascular system. Even if we look at something like cancer, right? If we really look at what cancer is, it's cells that are not reproducing correctly, or they're producing too quickly, or they're not producing quickly enough, right? And so if we look at just the basis of what it is in a cellular level and realize that it's the brain's energy that is responsible for cellular regeneration, if we improve the brain's ability to get its energy and instructions to those cells, then those cells are going to replicate in a more correct and optimal way. So I think that these are deeper concepts that, people can look at, to try to find the natural healing that they deserve, rather than, the pharmaceutical answer of these poisonous drugs, that most people are addicted to. Again, especially in the United States. We're only about 5% of the world's population, but statistically, we take about 50% of the prescription drugs for the whole world. So that's an epidemic in this country.
Hmm. Wow. Oh, all right. Thanks for sharing that one with us, right?
Yeah, my
And
pleasure.
right, okay. So, finally, I just want you to talk to, any young person out there who is listening to this conversation, right? What is
Yeah.
one thing you would want them to remember, or should I say one lesson you want them to learn about health, relationships, and taking care of themselves for the long term, right? Right.
Yeah. I think, when I look back to when I was in my early 20s, there was no internet.
Mm,
So it was a lot harder to come by information and a lot harder to come by truthful information. And although the internet, has every viewpoint and a lot of misinformation, like the truth is out there. So
mm,
I think that, you know, um, one of the biggest pitfalls these days is that, young people just aren't reading very much,
mm,
and the truth is out there. It's not just on websites, but there, are so many books that I can attribute to changing my life in a positive way, again, across the board, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And I think in order to be the healthiest that we can in these different ways, we have to really look for our truth, and truth that's not manipulated, and truth that actually leads to the results that you're looking for. And it's all trial and error. And, I think that, for younger people these days, there's so much distraction, it's everywhere. The phone
mm,
is attached to the hand. There's this constant, scrolling and just sort of these desperate needs for, dopamine and entertainment that just is so readily available. So I think it's really time management that's so important for young people these days, and taking the
mm,
time, to try to improve oneself rather than just to sit there and be entertained is the number one habit necessary, for having a long, healthy life.
mm. Wow. All right. And like you mentioned, time management, right? Very important. So yes, thank you, Dr. Adam. This has been amazing. And
Oh, thank
yeah.
you so much.
All right. And it brings me to the final segment of my podcast. I call it the rapid fire segment.
Yeah,
You
okay.
could, all right, you could either answer with a word or a phrase starting now.
Okay.
What what is one word that describes your 20s?
Discovery.
Hmm. Wow. All right. And what is one word that describes you now?
Um, Pragmatic.
Pragmatic. Okay. So would you prefer coffee or tea?
Hmm, Probably coffee, even though it's not the healthiest thing. I think, you anything in moderation, almost anything in moderation, true moderation. For me, it's just
Hmm.
an indulgence. I like the taste, but I don't think, no dairy. My coffee, and again, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting your rapid fire, but my coffee has three ingredients. It's got
Hmm.
espresso coffee, it's got agave, and it's got organic oat milk. That's it.
Hmm. Wow. Oh, all right. Okay. And yes, what is a daily habit you never skip?
Meditation.
Meditation. Right. And finally, what is one book that's influenced your thinking?
Oh my God, there's so many. I literally have about 1,200 books in the house.
Hmm.
One contemporary one that I would recommend is a book called Oh boy, I'm trying to figure out. I think a really good book as a starter for younger people is a book by a doctor who used to have an NPR show. His name is Gary Null, Null,
Mm,
and he wrote a book that's not his most popular book, but I think it's one of his most important, called Who Are You Really? And
mm,
he discusses the personality types. And I think if we really understand what influences us most, it gives us the best opportunity for success because we understand what inspires us and what drives us to do the things that we do and to have the inspiration to get from point A to point B of where we want to be in our future life.
mm. Wow. All right. Thank you for sharing that one with us, actually. And yes, finally, Dr. Adam, before you go, right, where can listeners get to learn more about you and
Yes.
also connect with you?
Yeah, so for your listeners, we're going through a big rebranding right now. So, sort of all
Mm,
social media and even the website is down, but very, very soon, within the next week or two, or I would say by the end of August at the very latest, they'll be able to find, all these materials at sexualgenius.com. If you have listeners that are looking for health coaching or sexual coaching or non-toxic masculinity, are some of the things that we really talk about in Sexual Genius, they can contact me at dradamkleinberg@gmail.com. That's DRADAMKLEINBERG at gmail.com. If they're looking for, more personal work, I'm really enjoy coaching one-on-one with clients to really help them achieve their goals.
mm. All right. Wow. And I'm gonna put a link in the show notes so it's easily accessible for listeners. And to my
Great. Thank you so
listeners,
much.
I want to say thanks for tuning into Conversations with Sekani. If this episode sparked something in you, just as it did in me, make sure to share to someone you think might need this and also subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. Once again, thank you, Dr. Adam. Do you have a wonderful day ahead of you?
Thank you so much. Same to you, and thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Take care.